Hey, Jaber! Hey, Jaber! Hey, Ruby! There's an incredible amount of diversity among different dog breeds, but dogs are actually all the same species. They've come to have these differences because of artificial selection, which is humans breeding them. So humans would pick dogs to breed based on what traits they were looking for in those dogs. And so over generations and generations of doing this, then we've ended up with all of our different dog breeds, which have different traits that humans were looking for in them. In this video, we're going to learn about natural selection instead of artificial selection. So instead of humans do the selecting of traits, nature does. So what is natural selection? Well, it is the process by which organisms with variations most suited to their local environment survive and leave more offspring. Now, that definition is kind of long, so let's break it down. Natural selection relies on three things. First, there has to be variation in traits. There's variation in these piglets. Some examples of variation here are they're different sizes, or they have different coloration on their back, different striping, and boy, are they cute or what. There's variation in these dandelions too, and this variation can come from two main sources. It can come from mutations, changes in the DNA, which could either result from errors during DNA replication, for example, or from environmental factors like radiation. Or variation can come from meiosis, because remember, meiosis does not produce eggs or sperm that are identical. Second, that variation has to be heritable. And what that means is it is able to be passed down through generations, from parent to offspring. And third, there's limited resources. So that means that not every individual in a population will be able to survive, and not every individual in a population will be able to reproduce to their fullest potential. Now, there's a term that's really important in biology when we talk about natural selection, and that is fitness. And fitness is how well an organism can survive and reproduce. So we're going to talk about an example of natural selection that's been observed in a population of birds. These birds live in the Galapagos Islands, and their name is the medium ground finch. There is a scientist couple named Peter and Rosemary Grant that have been studying these finches for years. These finches have variety in the size of their beaks. Some have larger beaks, some have smaller beaks. And they use these beaks to get their food, which is mostly tiny seeds. But in 1977, there was a major drought on Daphne Major, the island that they were studying. This meant that there was no rainfall, and so many of the plants on the island died, and there was not enough food to support the whole medium ground finch population. Now, the birds that were able to survive were generally the ones with bigger beaks, because they could crack open the larger seeds, so they could take advantage of a wider range of food sources. But the finches that had smaller beaks, many of them were not able to survive, and they died. So because more medium ground finches with larger beaks survived, they passed on that trait of larger beaks to their offspring, and over the course of just 2 generations, what the Grants saw was there was an increase of about 3 to 4% in the average beak size of the medium ground finches. Okay, so let's recap. Remember what we talked about at the beginning, these things that have to be true for natural selection to occur with the medium ground finches. Was there variation in traits? Yes, there was. Before the drought, there was already variation in the size of their beaks. Was that variation heritable or able to be passed on? Yeah. The offspring would inherit their beak size from their parents. Not all individuals are able to survive and reproduce. Yeah, we saw that because of the drought. There was less plants, less seeds for the ground finches to eat, So not all individuals were able to survive and reproduce, only those that were best suited for that environment. And so that brings us back to our term fitness. In this example, the medium ground finches with the larger beaks had better fitness during this drought. So they were able to survive better and reproduce and pass on that trait to their offspring. And so that's natural selection.